Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Craig. I'm Craig Hamilton Parker. I'm a psychic medium, and we talk about all things to do with what's going on in the news, mainly taking it from a psychic perspective and having a chat about topical things and current affairs and all sorts of things. But today, what's going on in the news is particularly interesting, which is the new discoveries they're talking about underneath the pyramids of Giza complex, the Kafir, I think it's called, pyramid, the middle one. There's claims that there is some discoveries there of underground chambers and things. So we're going to talk about that. Talk about some of the ideas that have been associated with this, in particular some of the ideas about Nikola Tesla's ideas about it. Edgar Cayce's talks about it, the Freemasons talks about it, the alchemical things, all sorts of things have been spoken about this. I'm going to share a few of the thoughts with you and have a discussion, because this is a live one today, and those coming in can ask me questions. So have a few questions, guys, as we go through this. I'll have a chat beforehand, and then I'll be pulling up some of your points and questions and comments. And don't forget, if you're here for the first time, do please subscribe. And if you're here for the millionth time, please do give us a thumbs up, because it helps the algorithm tremendously. And also, let's have your comments, because I like to try to turn these videos into little discussion forums as well, which also stimulate new ideas for all of us. And I love to share your thoughts and ideas as well, because many of us come from similar sort of backgrounds and ideas. So welcome to Coffee with Craig. Well, hi guys, thanks for joining me. I go live with these Coffee with Craigs at crazy sort of times. I have coffees at all sorts of days and nights. And we're going to make a kind of a general sort of chat about some of the things that have been going on with these discoveries with the pyramid complexes, which I think is interesting. Now, those of you that are patrons will know that I've already had a chat about this quite a lot on the Patreon pages, because we heard about this way before it broke in the news. Here in the UK, it's just broken recently in the Daily Mail. So, you know, real newspapers have got hold of this story now, and it's been flying around the web for a little while now. So I've been kind of a bit slow about doing this, just in case it really is a bit of fake news. I had a good look around at some of the videos about these discoveries. So let's just have a think about what this is. They're saying that underneath the pyramid called the Kafir pyramid, I think it's called, they've been doing some new forms of radio type of scanning. This is allegedly very brand new sort of way of doing things, and they can go down to much deeper depths. There was no agreed formal scanning here. This was done kind of a bit clandestinely. It's an Italian group, which obviously in some respects you can think, oh, well, that's handy. It's in Italian, so most people can't speak Italian. So it's a job to track down the sources and the websites. And when you actually look at who released this, I had a dig around on this, and it struck me that it seems to come from one Facebook page initially, which makes you think. Trevor Gassie's page. Now, I don't know if any of you guys coming in now, because you're all pouring in. I can see you coming in on the chat comments here. Often worth, if you're watching this on a computer, put the commentary on at the same time, because you can see what people are saying on the side of your screen, which is always quite fun too. But that made me wonder, where did this come from? Is this, I mean, it's great. It's a great headline. So consequently, newspapers are jumping on. I know lots of people want to read about this. So this has come from a presentation called Project Cafe, apparently, presented at Bologna in Italy. And they've been seeing all sorts of strange things under the ground there. They reckon, well, let me have a look at some of the pictures that I put up. Now, I haven't done a lot of time preparing these very well, but here's a few typical ones that are going around if I can find them. So the initial scans looked a bit like this. So this is a screenshot of the actual scans, right? Okay, there's the scans, right? They look like thermal heat images to me rather than radio scans. Now, I don't know how many guys here are experts on anything like this. I doubt it. We've come on pretty unusual time of day. But from that, they've now suggested that what's underground there is a series of tubes with staircases or something going down by the side of them. This is one of the images that's floating around at the moment about this. It looks a little bit too perfect to me. There's all this. Suddenly, this is sort of just been released. I mean, if this is going to be released, I would have thought it should have gone through Nature magazine or Scientific America or one of the archaeological magazines or some sort, or some and peer reviewed before it's shown. Really, if it's this big a thing. And of course, the papers have picked up on it. This is the picture from the Daily Mail that they put up, showing the what they think's underneath it. 8 vertically aligned cylindrical structures arranged in 2 parallel rows from north to south. Descends to a depth of more than 2,100 feet. And appears to be vertical shafts, right? And so that shows also the Kafir pyramid in the middle there. So it makes great news, doesn't it? But do you believe this? Do you believe this? I get a feeling this is going to be shown to be a bit of a scam of some sort, particularly when you start trying to dig around to find the sources. And most of the patrons were saying, well, we're not sure about this, but it's odd. I mean, I know there's been other kind of more scientific scans done in the same area as well. They've used things such as scanning muons. Now, muons, as far as I know, are sort of subatomic particles that can penetrate just about anything. And they've used this to scan this pyramid itself. I don't know if this has been used underground with the pyramid. And so this is one other sort of way of scanning. Wouldn't that be a kind of more interesting way of scanning? If they got this radio type of style scanning this is supposed to be from, my question, of course, would be, well, let's have a look how it's been tested. I'd like to know a little bit more about this. I mean, have you tried scanning some underground structures we know about, such as the London Underground or something where we know there's an underground structure of some sort, and from these strange sort of bright coloured sort of scans that we've got there, can we then say for sure that this gives us 8 structures underground, 2 square chambers underneath that, and then 2 miles of tunnels underneath that as well? So I would really like to know a lot more about the credentials of the people that are supposed to be putting this information out there. And from first and foremost, so I'm coming in first and foremost with a bit of a skeptical hat with this, because it sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? And if it's too good to be true, it's usually isn't, is it? So is it fake news? I don't know what you guys think. It doesn't mean to say, though, and this is what I want to bring the chat onto a little bit more about, it doesn't mean to say that there's not something under there. And I'm going to discuss and talk about some of those things that could be under. Let's hope they have found something. It would be fantastic, wouldn't it, if finally some of the great seers of past, particularly Edgar Cayce, that talked about the halls of records under there. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. if it was to be the case. Sorry, my camera's on blinking again here. So, what is under there? It would certainly be interesting thought that would the pyramid need a base structure of some sort, wouldn't it, to hold it up? I mean, they're building it on sand. And as we know, you need rock face. And I don't know what's underneath the pyramids. I presume there's a rock face underneath there of some sort that would reveal this. Let's have a few of your comments first. What do you think about this first part that I'm talking about here? So you're saying here, you believe it to be the truth. I believe this to be the truth. Why tell us? It reminds me of a battery. The pyramids have been built with such precision. Why not precision below also? Agreed. Why not? And we know that there is a sort of like a well that runs down at the very base of the pyramid. We know that goes down deep beneath the pyramid, which is filled in. But could that be leading to something else down there? It doesn't make sense that there'd be something underneath it. The pyramid on one level is almost a bit like a marker, isn't it? It's almost here is something. And then we see similar structures, of course, in South America. We see other interesting structures in India. And underneath some of those Indian temples, they're beginning to discover there's hidden stuff under the temples. It seems natural that a temple, you want to look underneath it, don't you? Like the vaults, for example, in nearby Winchester. And I'm going to turn that email sound off. The vaults in our cathedral nearby in Winchester, there's underground vaults, there's chambers underneath where people were buried and so forth. It seems quite natural to do that, doesn't it? Let's have another look at some of your comments because it's interesting. The problem is that some folk claim to know what's underneath based on the scans Craig showed, but what is those drawings cannot be seen in the scans. It's pure fantasy. And yet, you see, I think the general feeling is that this probably is fantastic sort of thinking, isn't it? And then even the Egyptian kids played in the tunnels. They're not allowed to speak. Now, this sort of brings us to some other ideas, because one of the thoughts are that there are also other structures around nearby of caves. Could there be caves built, natural caves underneath the pyramids? We've often, many ancient sites, like here we've got Stonehenge, and further down the road in Bath we've got the what were the old temples built on springs that they built the cathedral over, or in Bath. Underneath so many temples there are springs, and springs were considered sacred, and springs in ancient Egypt would have surely been something very, very sacred. And could there be some network of caves underneath that we've not discovered yet? It could be very far down, and that the pyramids were markers for some natural cave system. There is talk of a natural cave system in some areas. I don't know if there's anything been discovered as natural cave system underneath the pyramids, but there's a suggestion that there was a lot of water there, because there's also the theory that the Sphinx is much, much older than the pyramids, because the apparent water damage on the side of the rocks there. There's signs that things were blown not by sand, but by water that create the particular formations on the side of the Sphinx that was carved originally from a part natural rock. So I think once we start digging a bit deeper, literally, we'll find more there. Let's just get a few of your comments about that. You're saying there is a natural cave system. Yes, there is. There are areas underneath the all that area where the Egyptians have actually been down there. And what would early peoples have thought about cave systems? They might have been mysterious places. Our first ancestors used caves as places of religious worship. I mean, I went into the cave systems in Malta, where there's some fascinating ancient structures there, and in Gozo and places, and Gozo, and fascinating. But the caves were found as being some of the first places of the worship before they built the temples. So surely, if there was something like that, that could be one reason that the Egyptian civilization was particularly fascinated by this particular place. There must have been some water system there, and that whole area, when we go back much older history, the whole Sahara was once one of the most fertile places on earth, with water. And I've talked to archaeologists about this, that I've spoken about. I've done some work with archaeologists in the past where we hold objects and do psychometry of archaeology, and they gave me some things from that area from ancient times, and I was seeing water and water everywhere in a desert. So there's fascinating things there. So I think it would be interesting to explore some of the thoughts. I made myself a few notes, so I'm going to be using a few notes as we go with this, so I don't miss anything partly. But I was interested in Tesla, because he has some interesting ideas about why the pyramids are there, and it's not one that's talked about as much as I think it should be, because Nikola Tesla, who we know invented or discovered alternating currents, and invented the way of how to create an alternating current, which gave us the possibility of being able to transport electricity over much bigger distances than direct current. You know the stories, I expect. So he was really interested in how we could harness electricity in other ways, and be able to project electricity through the air, just as we do radio waves. Could we not project power somehow? And even the Trump family has the original documents of Tesla's inventions. Now, Tesla was a brilliant man, a genius, another Elon Musk, really, hence why Musk called his company Tesla, because it's the perfect name for everything associated with advanced electronics. But he based his ideas on the idea of wireless power, and things like that, and towers like this that could project this idea of the tower. And he believed that the location of the pyramid, particularly the Great Pyramid, was particularly significant because it aligns perfectly in so many ways with the Earth's sort of geometry, really. Particularly, for example, the Earth's cardinal points all come to the same point here. It's also, Tesla believed it was like the center of like cosmic energy, because he didn't limit himself just to science. He kind of had a far-ranging way of thinking about the world. And was it somewhere, because of its particular important position on the Earth, was it somehow, he felt, able to maybe harness or interact with the Earth's natural electromagnetic field? Now, these things have still not been properly explored. But if you look into, like, I went to Arunachala in India, and that had a really profound and unexplainable effect upon my inner self when I went there. Now, it's one of the sacred places of Shiva. There's multiple areas, mountains associated with Shiva for each of the elements. That would be earth, air, fire, ether, water, and so on. There's different elements associated with Shiva. That was one of the elemental energetic positions for Shiva. One of the other ones is Mount Kailash in northern India, in right up on China's areas now, but in Tibet. But that, again, I've not been there, sadly. But again, there's certain places where there's certain energy in the ground that is so totally different to anything we can experience. And if once it hits you, it really hits you hard. It's not fantasy. I sat in Arunachala and meditated, and I was so energized. It was unexpected for me. It was very unexpected that the power was so kind of high. And it's not something you can prove scientifically. That it's an inner experience. And again, if we go to Stonehenge here near us in Hampshire, where it's up in Wiltshire, but we're in Hampshire, and up in Wiltshire way, again, there's special energy, and particularly Woodhenge and other places that have a very powerful energy, particularly those off the tourist trail, as it were. And let's just have a few of there's another point you put up there. The pyramids are also set to true north. They had knowledge of things, and some of the temples in India, when you look at the sacred geometry of them, they're based upon the distance between the Earth and the Moon, and the difference between the Moon and the planets, and the Earth and the Sun, and the geometry is based on the geometry of the solar system that they couldn't possibly have known anything about. I mean, that's fascinating, isn't it? You know, that sounds that's interesting. My friend has just been inside the pyramids and said that was a humming vibration. And this is another thing. I've done a few other videos on my channel quite a long time ago now, actually, but about the feeling that I felt there's something about the pyramid that connects with the idea of sound, and that there's something sound associated with it. I mean, because if you look at the Indian ideas again, the temples there are connected with ancient mantras. The ancient Vedas, which are probably transcripts from things much older, perhaps going 10,000 years back to the pre-ice age times, many think, that the mantras were something special. And when you read the stories of the great seers, Swami Rama, for example, brilliant stories where he talks about going into the Tibetans and and into the Himalayas and the highest points and the most obscure places, and meeting these holy men. They were using mantras to help them to move at high speeds, mantras to help them be in two places at once, mantras to help them to take on the body of another person that had just died on the funeral pyre, and was pull the young body off and swap bodies. All of these things, all these strange stories, often based around mantras. That's another one. That's an interesting thought. There are pyramids all over the planet. I believe they are power chargers or energy batteries of some sort, and I see water running through them to charge somehow, some lost technology. See, I expect others here may have similar thoughts with that, isn't it? What were they all about? It's easy to poo-poo it and all say, oh yes, the reason everybody wants to find something under the Great Pyramids and all the pyramids is because it will qualify these crazy new age ideas. You can all suddenly sit back and feel smug and justified because we told you so. But there's no scientific proof, guys. But the thing is, this is ancient stuff, and also people like Tesla, for example, were not daft people. They were scientific minds that gave us some of the greatest ideas. And Musk, of course, tweeted this too. He said something, aliens built the pyramids, he said once, obviously, or OBV, in 2020, which I thought was interesting. He did retract it in a way, because he said, oh, actually, I think the second tweet was the Great Pyramids was obviously built by humans. But, was there some underlying reason that they were built other than as alleged funeral places? Because there's not actually been any funereal stuff found underneath there. There's not really been any sarcophaguses, for example, found there. I'm just going to keep my notes going because there's a few other ideas I want to share with you. And actually, when you think about the Great Pyramids and the pyramids there, the references in the Bible to the idea of the Israelites and things talk about the slavery, but they don't actually talk about the pyramids themselves. Oh, this is nice of you. Super stickers. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll take a pause to let you know if others want to follow suit. Thank you, Semra. Yeah, so it's quite fascinating, isn't it, that there was these other things. They say that the recent archaeology has found that the slaves that were from that area that we think built the pyramids show signs in their bone structures and the rest of it that they were extremely well fed. They weren't poor slaves that were being driven to in the same way that Hitler used his slaves in Nazi Germany. These were people that were being looked after and considered as being very important. And I think there's something in that. It might be more than the sort of simplistic story we seem to have about the reason these were built. I mean, just going back for a minute to the caves idea, which I think is an interesting idea, because there's quite a few bits of research out that says that there's natural caves and tunnels beneath the Giza pyramids. A note I got in 2008, a British explorer, Andrew Collins, claimed to discover a network of natural caves under the plateau, west of the Great Pyramid. My notes tell me here. So I don't know the details of that, but that's quite interesting. Just a quick bit of research showed me that. And he was inspired by another guy called Henry Salt. He was a British consul who recorded a tunnel system in the 1800s. So this isn't a new idea. And obviously there must have been speculation all the time. You know, if you watched my video the other day when we went to the graveyard in Highgate Cemetery, that video, lots of the burial chambers and things were based on Egyptian architecture. So it fascinated people right the way back. There's a Victorian graveyard, and then it all sprang into life in the 1920s as well, when new discoveries were made and when Tutankhamun was opened up, and suddenly it became the trendy piece of art to have Egyptian type of style of your clothing, or put it into paintings or into design, and even the even when you look at Art Nouveau and lots of that, it kind of got a strong Egyptian influence. And you know, Edgar Cayce too, when he started talking about the underground chambers and things like that, he was playing at the same time into something that was in the mindset of the time. Everybody was talking about that sort of thing. What are the pyramids, and why did they build them? So some of the ancient caves were connected with the idea of the myth of Sokar, the god of the underworld. Now, I remember once also, you know, I'll share this idea with you, even there's not any scientific basis to it. But when I was in Crete years and years ago, I was going a long way back at the development of my first development of mediumship. I used to do very long periods of meditation. And I spent a long period of meditation in Crete when I was on a vacation there, you know, holiday vacation, but I had time to really get into a deep meditation, and I started going to a deep meditation, and at that time I was trying to connect with my spirit guides, and one of the spirit guides that was working with me at that time doesn't seem to come into my frame of consciousness now, but I think it's one of the guides that was helping me develop, was an Egyptian. And I said, I didn't know anything about Crete at all. And he said, oh yes, we used to come to Crete. We used to come here for the timber. And I thought, the timber, pine trees. We would use it for the pine. We'd use it for helping with our constructions. I thought, well, that's interesting. And they said these were strange people. They lived underground, right? And actually, when I then went and did some subsequent research, little did I know that Crete, which is barren island now, was all covered in pine trees, and that they indeed did a lot of. They did all this dancing with the bulls and things, actually, and things like this, and worship the bull, but they did it underground. There was underground chambers in there, in the Minoan civilization that had this underground idea. So that you know, which had connected with ancient Egypt, suggests underground rituals. So surely the Egyptians used to do this too. So surely there must be something under there, maybe taken over a cave system, or the Egyptians could certainly build a lot, couldn't they? You know, so yeah, so that's quite okay. There's an interesting one as well. A Danish mystic, Mortinus, supposedly enlightened like the Buddha, had a vision of them being 90,000 years old and temples for initiation, where the pharaoh aspirant after trials got cosmic insight. And yeah, there were others that said similar things. What was his name? He did Quest in Ancient Egypt and Quest in Ancient India. Paul Brunton, that's it, Paul Brunton. Spent a night in the pyramids meditating and believed that they were places of initiation, but also places for astral projection. Because it has those kind of, I don't know what they call them, small little sort of outlets that look to the stars. So in the idea that they linked up with the cirrus. And those small little vents, as they were, he believed at the time, were for projection of the spirit to the stars. And I've always had a feeling personally, I think that the pyramids have something, maybe nothing to do with sort of the type of energy that Tesla was thinking about, but maybe some form of energy that was spiritual in nature. When he's talking about a cosmic sort of energy, actually, I believe Tesla spoke about. Correct me if I'm wrong with this. Let's have some comments later and pick up on anything where I'm making any inaccuracies. But I've always felt that they were some form of astral projection. They were something to be used to help us in some way connect with what I believe the spirit world. You know, why were the ancient Egyptians so deeply connected with this idea of death and the life beyond, almost obsessed with it? I mean, we're not obsessed in the same way in our world, are we, with this? But they were obsessed with it. So had they discovered something that maybe were the pyramids something to do with some form of type of projection to other planets and stars, or into other multi-dimensions, or some form of mediumship even, you know? I mean, yeah, so you've got some ideas here. Egyptians used to believe that our spirit needed to go to the go to the start, or the stars. Is that they believe the spirits were in the stars, didn't they? They believe that people, Napoleon, that was another interesting, wasn't it? Napoleon spent a night in there and came out white and wouldn't talk about what he'd seen. Yeah, that's another story. I mean, they used it as target practice in Napoleon's time, which seemed a great problem, you know. And they also used the Pantheon in Parthenon, rather, in Athens for the same reason. Oh, yeah, now there's another. I miss a few little notes here, but another one that I found quite interesting to think about too, because one of the stories associated with the pyramids is also the idea that it's supposed to be the place where was buried the Emerald Tablet. Now, this goes back before Edgar Cayce started talking about the idea of the lost knowledge hidden there. So obviously Cayce was perhaps being influenced by some of these other ideas, but the Emerald Tablet, this was the ancient, it's almost got the mythical quality about it as being something similar to the idea of the Ark of the Covenant, something very special. Now, did we possess in the past some special magical things? Maybe they were from aliens or something like that. I mean, we can grow crazy with the idea of ancient aliens visiting us, but you know, in a modern age, we know that life could be all over the universe, and maybe they've been here before. But the Emerald Tablets, a mysterious text, they were attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. I always get his name wrong. Okay, but look it up if I got it wrong. It was a kind of a legendary figure from ancient times who combined the ancient wisdom of Thoth, which was the Egyptian god of kind of wisdom and knowledge, really, and Hermes, the Greek god of knowledge. So this talks about bringing together the ancient Egyptian and Greek knowledge together. And they say that the ancient Emerald tablet is hidden under there. If it was a cave underneath and it had copper in it, maybe there's a deep green underground temple there. Maybe it's green, and that's why it's the Emerald Tablet. Could it be a cave that's become green underneath? I mean, again, we think about this also in ancient China. There's the underground burial chambers, which were massively extensive for the ancient emperor Qin, isn't it? I'm not sure if I pronounced his name correctly as well, but they even reckon under there's a lake of mercury underneath, a legend says. So the idea of putting things underground with the dead, that we always bury our dead, why shouldn't it be below, and maybe quite far below, perhaps in a network of caves underneath it, as I've been talking about? So this was the idea that the Emerald Tablet could be under there. It had some form of transformative power. This was more than just texts and writings. This is where the alchemists talked about with their hidden knowledge. It was one of the foundation stones, literally, of alchemy during the Middle Ages and Renaissance. And much of that tracks back to the idea that being like the Philosopher's Stone that could transform us and grant us immortality. Now, why shouldn't, that seems to link a lot with this idea with the pyramid, doesn't it, guys? Let's have another quick look at some of your comments here. Oh yeah, and that's another one, isn't it? Yeah, right. look up the missing book of the Bible, Enoch. Yeah, now this gets interesting, and that's again, Enoch is very linked into these ideas, and he knew what the pyramids were doing, and that intelligent life created them beyond the planet. The Freemasons also knew this as well. Well, I was going to come to the Freemasons because they revere the idea of a master builder, architect of the universe. They don't refer to God. They talk of God as the great architect, the architect of the universe. And the Freemasons kind of have beliefs that they were the builders of the Temple of Jerusalem, the old temple there. But Moses was also a great architect who knew about the building and the construction of the pyramids, and that the Freemasons considered themselves as tracing themselves right the way back to as being the builders of the pyramid itself, and that they're the custodians of the ancient knowledge. Now, many question that because they say, "Oh, this is just the fantasy that was built up during the the times of the 17th century and so forth, or did they really have the ancient knowledge of ancient Egypt?" And if there is an ancient knowledge, there would have been a secret society to protect that knowledge. In most societies, it's, if we go into some of the temples in India, there's the temple, then there's the inner temple. There's like the secret inner temple. So perhaps there was something in this. And also the idea that geometry is expressive of things. They talk about being on the square and things like that within Freemasonry. So could it not be that there is something written into the pyramids that could tell us something mathematically, not only about the ancient world, but is there a prediction in there of some sort hidden in its ancient numerology? Again, returning to the idea of the Indian temples, they are built according to astrological principles, and nothing is arbitrary in the measurements of the ancient Indian temples. And you can see written in them, some of them even have pictures of what look like dinosaurs. There's some hidden knowledge is written in the architecture, and so it makes history really interesting, and it makes visiting these places, extraordinarily interesting. So what else was, yes, I was thinking about the sacred geometry of the pyramids. Now, this is something you might have some thoughts about. Let's just get a few of your thoughts again here, because some of these are interesting. And don't forget, keep it going in the comments later on below, because these some great ideas to explore here. The Nazarenes knew these mysteries. The sect retained knowledge of ancient Egyptian practices, which were brought to the Levant at the time of the Exodus. Yes. So who was this mysterious figure, Moses? And what did he find on Mount Sinai? I've been on Mount Sinai, and it's a fascinating place. Another one of these sacred mountains. A lot of what we do in spiritual work through history has often been associated with underground places and mountains as well. Big things that we see in our environment, and springs as well have a lot to do with, and sounds and mantras. And because again, when you look to the ancient Egyptians, just like, I like to relate things to my knowledge of India, but just as mantras can, for example, in India, they say that a mantra can seal and lock a door. There's one underground, again, door that cannot be unlocked. And it said that you only can unlock this door beneath this temple by chanting the special mantra. And it's left because it will open when the correct person chants the mantra. A bit like, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, where there's another stories carrying on with similar ideas, that a sound can even lock an underground chamber. Some interesting, fascinating thoughts here. And they say that, again, under that temple is hidden huge wealth and also huge knowledge. So again, are we talking fantasy here? Is this natural for humans to want to do this? Is this some form of archetypal symbolism that Carl Jung would say is part of our need to explore the unconscious mind, and we symbolize this in our buildings? Or is this something real and actual, something that is still to be grasped? And the whole idea of the pyramids, of course, is this strange thing that within it we see all sorts of numbers. We see the golden ratio on there, and pi explained in mathematics unnecessarily sometimes. Why do it to such precision, you know? And so on. I'm just looking at your comments. Okay, that's another interesting one, actually. Hermes, who I always pronounce wrong, Trismegistus, is pictured holding a spinning world. This is a clue. Hermes is the designer of the Great Pyramid, and it was designed, camera went then, and it was designed to minimize the wobble in the Earth's rotation. Well, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't heard of that before. I believe also they talk about that the Emerald Tablet is guarded by a giant snake. And supposing, again, that makes me think about the Naga of India, Naga, the idea of snake people. And of course, we got it with David Icke and people perhaps gone a bit too far with the idea, I think. But could we have had some contact with some previous alien civilization centuries ago that somehow had snake-like qualities? Because it's written there in the Indian things, and it's written around the world. We can see it in Quetzalcoatl and things like that in South America and so forth. Yeah, so there's always this quest for geometric perfection in places like the pyramids, and of course in all the ziggurats and so forth of the Mayans and the Incas and the and so on. There's always strange geometry hidden in this, much of which we haven't understood. But why have this obsession with these things? Why not just bung up a pyramid? Why not build like we do nowadays, where we throw up any old thing? You know, why such a need for mathematical perfection with these things? And I think it's something, again, that maybe or maybe not, that the Freemasons were perhaps onto. You know, it's again, if Freemasonry is all about measurement and numbers and so forth, you know. So I don't know what all the secrets are for that, but I'd imagine that those that follow that path and explore those things would come across all sorts of mysterious ideas, over and beyond the knife and fork Freemasons that just go and have dinner at 9 o'clock or 1:45 and so forth, and the rest of it. So there's something else there. Now, of course, the other one is Edgar Cayce, the great psychic from America. He died in 1945, I think, but he was called the Sleeping Prophet, and I'm sure most of you here probably know about him. But he claimed that the pyramids, and particularly beneath the Sphinx, was the idea that there was a chamber of the Hall of Records, and these records, he claimed, intuitively getting this information, but you know, he got some amazing evidence and proofs, Edgar Cayce. So you know, we got to take him seriously with what he has to say. But he said that was around 10,000 years ago, he was saying, there was a great civilization, and particularly epitomized by Atlantis, and that information at the time of the Great Destruction, the Great Flood, was kept underneath the pyramids. Now, Cayce was talking at a time before people like Graham Hancock were around to give us these new ideas of a pre-Diluvian civilization before the time of the Great Flood that came after the Great Ice Age. And Hancock puts forward this idea that there was a huge amount of fresh water being held back by glaciers, and suddenly it broke, and it filled the size of Canada, he's talking about, that filled the oceans and raised the sea levels tremendously. And if we look at all of the great stories of history, we've got stories of the flood, whether it be Gilgamesh or whether it be Manu in India, and around the world, there's all these stories of the sudden flood. Some people think it was the flooding of ancient Sumeria, but it was more than that, because we already do know that there's undersea cities found off the coast of India, for example, and suggestions of things off Japan, and most of our civilization is usually around the coastal areas, isn't it? So, you know, very, very interesting that Cayce said 10,000 years ago. This was before these modern theories that many still strongly disagree with, but I think there's a very strong case when you really dig into it and you read Hancock's work, for example, in detail. You know, I'm pretty sure he's right with the idea that there was an ancient civilization way before the 10,000 odd years ago. I mean, how did they know about things like the coastline of Antarctica, for example, which was under ice for centuries, and yet they were able to draw that? So ancient maps and things and all sorts of other bits of evidence seem to suggest there was ancient stuff there, wasn't it? So, Cayce in particular said it was underneath the Sphinx. And he said about it was near, I think he said it was near the right paw of the Sphinx. And they did actually find like a chamber under there, but it wasn't a man-made chamber. It was just a natural anomaly, they said, beneath the Sphinx. There was a hollow space found there. But even if he just got that bit right, and then there was a hollow space where he said it was, even if it hadn't been built by the ancient Egyptians or others, or whatever civilization built this giant Sphinx, which was actually originally a lion, they think, and then it was carved into the head of a pharaoh afterwards. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? He saw something. Did he see further? Was there something deeper underneath? They do entertain the idea now, of course, but there's lots of restrictions about what they're going to do there, I believe, of how far they're prepared to dig. And you're saying, what do I think of these things? Are they like, do you think they're portals to other dimensions? It's a possibility in my mind, because as I said before, supposing we were to travel to the stars, we couldn't physically do it, not with our knowledge of physics as it stands at the moment. It would take so many light years that we'd have to have generations and generations and generations to be able to travel between one star and another. And I think at light speeds, and it would just be the distances are too vast. But like we've spoken about on this channel sometimes, when we talk about telepathy, and like you're doing a reading for someone across the world, there's no distance. It's like you can do a telepathic type of reading, because a lot of reading is about telepathy. You pick up on the person's memories and thoughts and feelings. Where am I getting that from? So there's no distance in telepathy. What we do is we connect into the here and now with it. I don't feel like some great mind thought has gone out and reached over to someone in California having a reading. No, somehow we connect in the here and now, and we can connect over distance. Science is poo-poos telepathy at the moment, which is madness, because this is the key into interstellar travel, that we can do it with some form of controlled inner projection. And were the ancient Egyptians perhaps onto something with this? Could this be what they were? This was my thought, that what it was for, not just as a place for the records, but what would those records be about? They'd have spiritual knowledge, or would they have energetic knowledge in them, or would they have some form of spiritual understanding like we see in the remnants, what's left from those ancient civilizations, with the teachings about, for example, forgotten mantras or forgotten knowledge of some sort, or the incredible knowledge that, for example, yoga still maintains about how the human condition can be made healthy, and how we can astral project, how we can enter states of higher consciousness. I mean, those things surely are much more important than any other form of knowledge on the planet. So those are my main ideas, guys. I think that's some interesting ideas. I mean, was there a lost Atlantic? Is there a hidden Atlantis? Was there a hidden link to that, or was there other civilization? Were they all interconnected? Was the idea of Mu part of this, or was the idea of Kamari Kandam part of this, or and so on? When those flood levels came up, where did they hide the knowledge, and how long ago was it? I mean, if we all left this planet now, how long would it take for our civilization and signs of it to be completely wiped away? In 10,000 years, there wouldn't be much to see. And I think the earlier civilizations weren't so dependent upon architecture as we are today. This was one bit of architecture from those times. So is there perhaps, these are just thoughts to leave you with, perhaps, and you might have some other ideas, guys. You're talking about the pyramid here. That's some interesting thoughts. I just click some of your thoughts up, so pop them up now if you want. Talking about portals. Yeah, so now you're talking here about I'm so over government and other oppressing systems of society. We're not meant to live this way. Well, this brings perhaps to some other ideas, as well, that people have thought about with the pyramids and things like this. Have we already discovered what's under there? And have people perhaps discovered things like maybe sound powers of anti-gravity or crystal energy? There's people have put ideas out like this before. And how did they manage to make these massive stones so perfectly cut in a time when there was, they didn't have that sort of technology? This is, Bronze Age tools. How on earth do you do things with bronze? If you've ever, I've got an itchy nose today, I must be lying. Bronze Age tools, they've got, I've been to Iron Age and Bronze Age sort of events, historic events, sort of things where they reenactments and so forth. And you look at a Bronze Age instrument, an axe and stuff. It'll do something, but it can't carve. It can't carve and cut stone to the precision that they had in those days. And what were they used for? People are asking, were they energy generators? Were they stargates of some sort? Were they healing chambers? Were they sort of high frequency sort of base communication devices? I mean, we'll never really know yet. Or have they already discovered what these things are? Perhaps, these things have already been unearthed. The Vatican has all sorts of hidden secrets. Some say the ancient documents and what was discovered there were hidden in the Vatican sometime. I'm going to go there soon in a few weeks' time, and maybe I'll find it. Maybe the Pope will invite me down to have a look at the chambers if he's well enough. And some say that they're hidden away in the Smithsonian institutes, and the elite archaeologists have kept hold of this, or the Freemasons keep it, and so forth. We can only surmise. And when there's a mystery, of course, the brain boggles and we go off in all sorts of directions, wondering about what it's all about. Anyway, I think it's a fascinating thing, and I'm really grateful to you guys all coming in and putting your ideas up there. And you're welcome to say any other last comments if you want. Well, I'm just sort of concluding now. But if you've been enjoying this, if you've really been enjoying this, have a look at some of my books. I've just put them all onto, well, not all of them, but some of the best ones onto Audible. I've got to sort the others out. You can actually, not me speaking it, sadly, because I have that infuriating cough that stops me doing a full talk with them. But there's you can have a look, listen to my books, AI Audible, on there on Amazon at the moment. And let's have some of your last final comments, guys. Here, it's a nice thought. Await the mass awakening. I think it's all something to do with that, and in the Indian stories, in Indian, they talk about that, like some of these temples can't be opened until the great avatar comes, the great beings that will be able to do this. It's got like a second coming idea of the great awakened beings, Vishnu usually, but who knows? I've always felt there's something like this behind it somehow. Pyramids are communication devices with the whole universe. There are many pyramids around the world. And we say, it must be aliens. But, us humans are pretty enterprising people. We've managed to build some pretty incredible technology nowadays. Maybe they just did things in different ways in the past. They didn't do it with they didn't have an industrial revolution. So they developed ways of communicating with people on further stars in much simpler ways, without necessarily having to have all these computers and things with artificial intelligence we have nowadays. Maybe it could be done by just very, very deep spiritual insight. Who knows what the human being is capable of? If you've met, I've met holy men that can do miraculous things, and I believe that was true, not just trickery. And I believe the NAADIs, for example, that I've got involved in, they're not just trickery; they are real things. They really do connect us with the ancient knowledge. And so when we accept, and mediumship, of course, I know it's true because I do it. Some people, skeptics say, he's an idiot, he can't do these things, it's all conning himself or conning others. Okay, believe that, but I know it to be true. It takes away my fear of death. These things, when we know these things are true, then what other things are human beings capable of? Are we capable of being multidimensional beings? Are we already multidimensional beings, but we don't realize it yet? You know, what is the capabilities of consciousness? The stories in some of the ancient Indian stuff talk about almost like bombs, Brahma bombs, that consciousness could be used to almost as a form of warfare, and that in ancient times there was a consciousness type of warfare between us and other alien beings. You know, what was all that about? Why would people talk about these things? These are weird sort of myths, if that's what they are. Anyway, guys, I'm really pleased you've come here today and joined me. I'll put a short little advert at the end as I say goodbye to you. It's just about my books, and it's just a short one. But remember, they're all out. Well, most of them are out there on Audible. So if you can't be bothered reading, go and get an Audible copy of my book. I've only just gone live with those, so I'm keen to see a few of those sell. It'd be nice to see people listening to it. Okay, thanks for joining me. We'll see you soon, guys. Bye for now.
Would you like to know more about the paranormal world? Craig Hamilton Parker's books are now available on Amazon. Explore the future. Discover what happens after death. Unlock the secrets of your dreams. Learn to develop your own psychic skills.